From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day, this is Dateline Malacañang, and here are the news. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. pushed for several priority agendas in his intervention during the plenary session of the 43rd Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN Summit in Jakarta, Indonesia. The president reiterated the importance of facilitating a rules-based multilateral trading system that is open, free, and fair, and in order to realize the region's economic integration efforts. He also emphasized the need to enhance ASEAN connectivity and supply chains. In addition, he urged fellow ASEAN leaders to provide greater support for the increased participation of micro, small, and medium enterprises or MSMEs and startups in the digital and creative economies. President Marcos Jr. also assumed the lead role in operationalizing the ASEAN guidelines on the protection of migrant workers and family members in crisis situations.
Always at the heart of our community building should be our people. We must continue to prepare our people, especially the marginalized and the vulnerable, such as the women and the persons with disabilities in business, for the digital future. The citizens of ASEAN should reskill and upskill to maintain their leading roles in our economies. As a voluntary lead shepherd for the cooperation against trafficking in persons, the Philippines will continue to call for more concerted efforts in intensifying regional and international cooperation, especially in mobilizing resources to prevent and combat the abuse of technology in TIP. We look forward to operationalizing the ASEAN Leaders' Declaration on combating trafficking in persons caused by the abuse of technology.
On the upcoming Conference of Parties or COP28, President Marcos Jr. called on ASEAN leaders to intensify the implementation of their commitments, which include climate finance, technology development and transfer, and capacity building. This is crucial in enhancing ASEAN's ability to prevent, mitigate, manage, and adapt to the impacts of climate change.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. declared when he delivered his intervention during the 43rd ASEAN Summit Retreat session at the Jakarta Convention Center in Jakarta, Indonesia, that the Philippines firmly rejects misleading narratives that frame the disputes in the South China Sea solely through the lens of strategic competition between two powerful countries. The president said this not only denies us our independence and agency, but also disregards our own legitimate interests. The president called upon all parties for self-restraint on activities that complicate disputes in the South China Sea, reiterating that ASEAN must not undermine regional peace, stability, and security. The ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, or ADMM, Guidelines for Maritime Interaction, is a joint declaration where ASEAN defense ministers agreed to undertake practical measures such as protocols of interaction and direct communication channels to reduce vulnerability to miscalculations and to avoid misunderstanding and undesirable incidents at sea during the 9th ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, or ADMM, in 2015. The ministers also agreed to practice and observe international protocols such as Code for Unplanned Encounters at Sea, or CUES, and commence work on crafting protocols of interaction to maintain open communications to avoid misunderstanding and prevent undesirable incidents as reflected in the 2016 ADMM Joint Declaration, among others. President Marcos Jr. also mentioned the Philippines' maritime collaborations by citing the second ASEAN multilateral naval exercise, or AMNEX, of Zambales and Bataan, as well as the 40th Joint Working Group on the implementation of the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, or JWG doc in Manila. These collaborations aim to expedite the negotiations for a substantive and effective Code of Conduct, or COC, in the South China Sea. Here is Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Your Majesty, Excellencies. We gather today at a critical juncture in the history of our region. The global landscape is witnessing unprecedented shifts, from the escalation of regional security threats to the transformation of the global economy. As one community, our collective well-being hinges upon our ability to respond to the changing paradigm of our times in a timely and effective manner. In these times of uncertainty, ASEAN should matter more than ever. The significance of ASEAN on the global stage can only be sustained so long as we can demonstrate to the rest of the world that ASEAN continues to be a force for positive change. The first step in that positive change is the promotion and the maintenance of peace. Because as we speak for progress, that progress must be built on a strong foundation of peace. And so let us look at the threats to peace in our region. One test of our relevance is our ability to facilitate a peaceful resolution in Myanmar. We remain firm that the resolution to the Myanmar crisis should be Myanmar-owned and Myanmar-led. We continue to support the efforts of the ASEAN Chair to engage all stakeholders in Myanmar. We reiterate that all efforts in Myanmar should be in line with a 5-point consensus and done in coordination with the Chair of ASEAN. Your Majesty, Excellencies, our vision for the South China Sea is a sea of peace, stability, and prosperity. Today, sadly, this remains a distant reality. For our part, the Philippines will continue to work with all the countries to foster a rules-based international order. We remain committed to the peaceful resolution of disputes in the South China Sea in accordance with international law. We will continue to uphold and exercise freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea in accordance with international law, including, of course, the 1982 UNCLOS. But let me be clear, we do not seek conflict, but it is our duty as citizens and as leaders to always rise to meet any challenge to our sovereignty, to our sovereign rights, and our maritime jurisdictions in the South China Sea. No country would expect any less. No country would do any less. The Philippines firmly rejects misleading narratives that frame the disputes in the South China Sea solely through the lens of strategic competition between two powerful countries. This not only denies us our independence and our agency, but it also disregards our own legitimate interests. We once more call upon all parties for self-restraint on activities that complicate disputes in the South China Sea. We must not undermine regional peace, stability, and security. We cannot emphasize enough that actions, not words, should be the ultimate measure of our commitment to securing peace and stability in the South China Sea. Anything else simply does not suffice. We therefore seek your support for the operationalization of practical measures such as the ADMM guidelines for maritime interaction, which we envision will be expanded to our external partners in due time. The Philippines is also pleased to have hosted the second ASEAN multilateral naval exercise off Zambales and Bataan, and the 40th meeting of the JWD-DOC in Manila to expedite the negotiations for a substantive and effective code of conduct in the South China Sea. As tensions and mistrust between the great powers escalate, so too does the prospect of miscalculation that threatens to engulf the region with the severest consequences for all of us. it is imperative that we leverage the ASEAN regional architecture to serve as a diplomatic bridge that promises mutual understanding, strategic trust, and peaceful settlement of disputes. History will ultimately judge whether the supremacy of the rule of law prevails, ushering in an era where all nations truly stand as equals, independent and unswayed by any single outside power. The challenge for us remains that we must never allow the international peaceful order to be subjected to the forces of might applied for a hegemonic ambition. The future of peace rests now on how we together face this challenge to that peace. Thank you and good afternoon.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. urged member countries of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, to call on developing countries to strengthen their commitment to climate action. In his intervention during the plenary of the ongoing 43rd ASEAN Summit in Jakarta, Indonesia, President Marcos said that climate change is the most urgent threat to a country's progress. With the Philippines among the most disaster-prone countries in the world, President Marcos said the government will continue prioritizing international cooperation that will make ASEAN climate smart and disaster ready, including through the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. President Marcos is in Jakarta, Indonesia for the 43rd ASEAN Summit and related summits at the invitation of ASEAN Chair this year, Indonesian President Joko Widodo.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. highlighted on Tuesday the importance of a stronger partnership between Indonesia and the Philippines, both in the public and private sectors, to explore more business opportunities in various areas as Southeast Asia recovers from the pandemic. President Marcos particularly pushed for increased tie-ups in agriculture, energy, digitalization, and supply chain during the roundtable meeting with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Business Advisory Council, or ASEAN-BAC, attended by chief executive officers, CEOs of various businesses and corporations. The president also reassured Indonesian businesses and investors of the Philippine government's commitment to continue supporting foreign investments in the ways that they can help one another and that would be mutually beneficial, the groups that they represent and the country. The president mentioned the current thrust of his administration, particularly its focus on developing those priority areas. In the case of the Philippine agriculture sector, he said it is still struggling to recover from the big effects of diseases such as avian influenza and swine fever. Another focus of the government is energy, especially on shifting from traditional energy sources to renewables. He said these are the elements that his government is trying to balance. The country could move forward by working with ASEAN, especially on improving physical connectivity.
Dateline Malacañang.
Fulfilling the commitment of Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. to prioritize the health sector in the Philippines, the Office of the President, or OP, has provided 200 million Philippine peso in financial assistance to the Philippine Orthopedic Center, or POC. POC Medical Center Chief Dr. Jose Pujalte Jr. said that the financial assistance from the OP will go a long way in sustaining the operations of the country's prime orthopedic center, especially with the upsurge in the cases of injuries in the country. Aside from helping in need Filipino orthopedic patients, Pujalte said that the cash assistance will also help in their efforts to modernize the POC by procuring state-of-the-art hospital facilities and equipment. He added that the assistance is a manifestation of the commitment of President Marcos to uphold the welfare of orthopedic patients, as promised during his second State of the Nation address, or SONA. He noted that the POC has been operational since the 40s. Pujalte said that they can now accommodate more than 600 patients daily with a donation received from the Office of the President in compliance with the Universal Healthcare Law, which provides that all Filipinos must be able to avail affordable, accessible, and quality medical care.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Office of Executive Secretary defended the legal basis for the decision of the Office of the President to release the 221.424 million Philippine peso confidential fund to the Office of Vice President Sara Duterte last year. In a statement, the OES said that the confidential fund was released in compliance with Special Provision Number 1 under the 2022 Contingent Fund, authorizing the Office of the President or OP to approve releases to cover funding requirements of new urgent activities that need to be implemented. The OES also emphasized that Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. saw the need to release the fund in support of Vice President Duterte's initiative upon the recommendation of the Department of Budget and Management or DBM. The Office of the Vice President Duterte requested that OP to release 221.424 million Philippine peso for maintenance, operating, and other expenses or MOOE items such as financial assistance or subsidy amounting to 96.424 million Philippine peso and confidential funds for newly created satellite offices in the amount of 125 million Philippine peso. The fund is chargeable against the fiscal year 2022 contingent fund.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives Committee on Appropriations terminated the deliberations on the 10.7 billion pesos proposed budget of the Office of the President or OP for the year 2024. Committee Chair Elizalde Co emphasized the paramount importance of the Office of the President in the performance of the duty of the President of the Republic of the Philippines. Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin said the proposed budget seeks to enable the President to fulfill his duties and fund the various programs, activities, and projects of the OP in fiscal year 2024. The OP's budget proposal is slightly higher than this year's appropriation of 10.615 billion pesos. Bersamin said the OP budget proposal will be enough for the presidency to meet the exacting demands of being the head of state, the head of government, the chief executive, and the commander-in-chief. He said the lifting of stringent health restrictions provides an opportunity for the president to conduct the affairs of the state outside the physical confines of his office, such as more meetings and presidential engagements. Bersamin said a budget adjustment would also accommodate the logistical requirements of honoring invitations from foreign leaders to visit their countries and the making of diplomatic initiatives which will yield job-creating investments. He further noted that the proposed budget will allow the OP to revive the implementation of necessary infrastructure works within the palace complex that were stalled due to the pandemic, as well as the gradual restoration and improvement of the mansion house facilities in Baguio City. Of the 10.7 billion pesos budget proposal, 72% or 7.746 billion pesos would go to maintenance and other operating expenses, 16% or 1.676 billion pesos to capital outlay, and 12% or 1.284 billion pesos to personnel services, inclusive of retirement and life insurance premium and pension.
Dateline Malacañang.
Key stakeholders from the agricultural sector in Mimaropa and Eastern Visayas regions have expressed their support for the issuance of Executive Order or EO number 39 by Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr., which sets price ceilings on rice in the whole country. EO 39 signed by the President and issued on August 31 took effect on September 5th. And sets the price for regular milled rice in the market nationwide at 41 pesos, while the price cap for well-milled rice is 45 pesos. Bantay Buklura, ARBs, and Farmers Association President Lilian Macalood said that they support the decision of President Marcos to implement the mandated price ceilings on rice, as they hope that the prices of rice will remain consistent. Macalood added that they are greatly affected by the surge of prices of rice in the market. Palawan Arc Cooperative Federation General Manager Raimundo Imaysay also expressed his support for the implementation of the mandated rice price caps in the market, as he sees the good intention of the executive order, especially when successfully enforced. Raimundo believes that President Marcos's order will eliminate the unhealthy competition among rice traders who are taking advantage of the situation and will also get rid of the abusive cartels who are playing big in the price manipulation of rice. Carolina Pacheco Hoson, member of the Malsada Pisco Farmers Group in Leyte, echoed the sentiments of Macalood and Raimundo as she thanked President Marcos for coming up with the executive order since consumers will now be able to buy their products at a reasonable price. Other members of farmer groups such as the San Isidro Organic Farmers Association of Barangay Isidro, Santa Fe, Leyte, Dayabong Kabuhay ng Gatud, Yakag, Darpo Oriental Mindoro of Gatud, Calapan City, Oriental Mindoro, the Genero ARB MPC of Dar Occidental Mindoro, and the Dubduban farmers and fisher folks have also expressed their support for the new order. Before departing for Jakarta, Indonesia, to participate in the 43rd ASEAN Summit and related summits, President Marcos has committed to provide aid for rice retailers who would be adversely affected by the imposed price ceiling on rice.
Dateline Malacañang.
And in related news, the Philippine Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, is ready to provide cash assistance to small rice retailers who may incur losses as Executive Order or EO 39, which sets a price ceiling on regular and well-milled rice, took effect. In a radio interview, the SWD Secretary Rex Gatchalian said he was directed by Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. to use the department's Sustainable Livelihood Program, or SLP, in anticipation of small rice retailers' losses from the temporary price cap. The SLP is a capacity building program that provides startup capital for those who wish to start a small business. Capital build foresees similar to the effects of the EO 39 to small businesses and employment grants. Secretary Gatchalian said the SLP currently has a 5.5 billion pesos budget which can be immediately used to help cushion the impact of the rice or the impact of the price cap on rice, particularly among small retailers who have very small inventory. He said that the SWD is just waiting for the list of qualified small rice retailers, which will be provided by the Philippine Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI, and the Department of Agriculture, or DA. He said qualified recipients will receive a one-time financial aid amounting to maximum of 15,000 Philippine peso. To date, the DTI and the DA are currently compiling a list of the affected rice traders and retailers who will receive the government's assistance. Gatchalian also had a meeting with the Speaker Ferdinand Martin Romualdez, who vowed to raise 2 billion pesos to help augment the SLP budget for the benefit of more small rice traders and retailers. Under EO 39 signed by Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin, the mandated price ceiling for regular milled rice is 41 pesos per kilo, while the mandated price cap for well-milled rice is 45 pesos per kilo. EO 39 serves as the strongest weapon to date of the Marcos administration to protect consumers against hoarders, rice cartels, and illegal price manipulators. It mandates a coordinated effort among various agencies to ensure the strict implementation of the mandated price ceilings, intensify the fight against hoarding and illegal importation of rice, and take measures against cartels to ensure fair market competition and uphold consumer welfare and protection. Meanwhile, Marikina City Representative Stella Kimbo is pushing for a national rice emergency response that seeks to shield consumers and local farmers as well as traders during tight conditions in the market, such as dwindling supply and soaring prices of rice. House Bill 9030, or the proposed Philippine Rice Emergency Response Act, provides a strategic set of solutions that the government could implement during times of anticipated shortages and sustained price spikes of the staple food.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine Department of the Interior and Local Government or DILG Secretary Benjamin Benhur Abalos appealed to rice retailers and dealers to comply with the rice price ceiling to help ease consumers' burden. The DILG chief made the call following an inspection at the NEPA Q-Mart and Save More supermarket in Cubao, Quezon City, together with Mayor Joy Belmonte and Department of Trade and Industry DTI Assistant Secretary Agaton Uvero, to check the compliance of rice retailers with the price ceiling set by Executive Order or EO 39. 41 pesos per kilogram for regular milled rice and 45 pesos per kilogram for well-milled rice. Abalos said the government would compensate rice retailers to make up for the reduced prices that were previously out in the market. He appealed to rice retailers to bear with the inconvenience for the meantime, noting that the rice price cap is only temporary. Abalos noted that the government is now making the necessary computation on how much aid should be provided to the rice dealers and retailers, adding that there is no timetable yet on how long the price ceiling will be in effect. He said, the ILG will continue to launch a massive information drive to make the rice dealers and retailers aware of the rice price cap. Abalos, meanwhile, said no arrests were made on retailers selling rice beyond the price ceiling. He also directed the Philippine National Police to extend assistance in the enforcement of EO 39. PNP Public Information Chief Colonel Jean Fajardo said the role of the PNP together with other law enforcement agencies will be to assist other departments in the form of law enforcement operations. Also on Tuesday, the Department of Agriculture and the DTI simultaneously inspected 18 Metro Manila markets. In a statement, DA said it is already preparing the assistance intended to affected retailers. The DA and the DTI have also started to compile a list of rice traders and retailers who will be affected by the rice price ceiling. The DA would also push for the inspection of warehouses to address concerns related to hoarding and illegal rice imports.
Dateline Malacañang.
Finally, for Dateline Malacañang, the Malaysian envoy in the Philippines said digitalization will become a key component in the Philippine-Malaysia bilateral ties as the two countries mark 60 years of diplomatic relations and strive to further increase the engagements in year 2024. During a forum in Makati City, Malaysian ambassador to the Philippines, Dato Malik Melvin Castellino, said, digitalization would be the way of the future in terms of public relations, education, business, banking, among other sectors. As a regional leader in digital evolution, Castellino said Malaysia is committed to sharing its best practices and development experiences to the Philippines. In sharing Malaysia's success story on digital transformation, Gopi Ganesalingam, Senior Vice President of the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation or MDEC, underscored that the fast-tracking the digital adoption of the government, the people, and small businesses is vital in accelerating a country's economic growth. Malaysia's digital economy, derived from the traditional economic activities that utilize digital technologies, has contributed 23.2% to the national gross domestic product or GDP. By year 2025, Ganesalingam said this figure is expected to rise up to 25.5%. Meanwhile, he said the government would play a huge part in preparing its job market to become digitally savvy as a rising need for digitalization also increases the risk of job insecurity. During his visit to Malaysia in July, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. and Malaysian Prime Minister Dato Seri Anwar Ibrahim agreed to boost interaction and work on agreements in various areas of cooperation, specifically the digital economy, to increase trade and investment. Multilaterally, the Philippines and Malaysia, along with the rest of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, also seek to transform the region into a leading digital community powered by secure and transformative digital services technologies, and ecosystem.
Dateline Malacañang.
And that is all for today's Dateline Malacañang for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. This has been Bea Gaza.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila. Dateline Malacañang.